Welcome to this thrilling journey of survival, bravery, and humanity's last stand. In a world where the undead roam freely, fighting for the future of Earth, this is a story of courage, strategy, and an epic battle for survival. You'll witness the harrowing struggle between humans and zombies, as both sides face off for the ultimate prize, control of the Earth. With each chapter, the stakes get higher, and the tension will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you're ready for an adrenaline-pumping, heart-racing tale, this is just the beginning. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so you never miss an update on this epic saga. Now, let's begin the story of the final war, humans versus zombies for the future of Earth. It all began on a day that felt like any other. Cities bustled with life, and the world seemed at peace. But in the shadows, something dark and sinister was stirring. An infection had spread across the globe, turning the population into mindless, ravenous creatures. In a matter of days, civilization crumbled, and the world was plunged into chaos. The first signs were subtle, rumors, strange disappearances, and hushed whispers of a new illness. People thought it was just another flu strain, something temporary. But when the first outbreaks occurred, the world realized it was far worse than anyone could have imagined. The infected were not just sick, they were transformed, their minds lost to a primal hunger that only one thing could satisfy: human flesh. The news spread quickly, and panic set in. Governments collapsed, and the military fought valiantly to hold the line. But as the infected numbers grew, it became clear that the war against them was one that could not be won. Among the survivors were a group of unlikely heroes, each carrying their own burdens and regrets from the past. At the forefront was Captain Mara Cole, a seasoned soldier whose career in the military had prepared her for many things, but not for this. Alongside her were a diverse group of individuals: a former scientist named Dr. Alan Hayes, a mechanic named Sam, who was always able to fix anything that was broken, and Lily, a young woman who had lost everything but still held on to a shred of hope. Together, they were the last hope for humanity. One night, as they sat around a campfire on the outskirts of what used to be a bustling city, Captain Cole shared the news that would change everything. The last known safe zone for humans, a fortified compound built to withstand the undead, had fallen. The survivors there had been slaughtered, and the infected had breached the final bastion of safety. The fight for humanity's survival had entered a new phase. "We can't run anymore," Captain Cole said, her voice low but steady. "It's not just about surviving anymore. It's about fighting back. If we don't take a stand now, they will overrun everything. We need to get to the heart of their infestation, find the source of this plague, and destroy it once and for all." The group was silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. The journey ahead would not be easy. The infected were everywhere, lurking in the ruins of the cities, and every step outside their safe house brought them closer to death. But there was no other choice. Dr. Hayes, the scientist, spoke up, his voice trembling. "I've been researching the infection for months now. We know that the virus spreads through saliva, blood, and bites. But I believe there's a central node, a core, that's driving the infection. If we can destroy it, we might have a chance to stop the zombies once and for all." Mara nodded, her eyes steely with determination. "Then that's where we're headed. We have to get to the heart of the problem and destroy it. This war is about humanity's future, and we can't afford to lose." As the group packed up their gear and prepared to leave, the gravity of their mission hung over them like a heavy cloud. They had no guarantee of success. They had no idea what awaited them in the heart of the infected zones. But one thing was certain: the fate of the Earth rested on their shoulders. With the night sky above them and the ruins of humanity stretching out before them, they set off on their journey. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the distant moans of the infected could be heard echoing through the wreckage of the once great cities. But they were resolute. This was their mission. They would face the darkness head-on, and if they failed, humanity would fall with them. The journey was long, the terrain treacherous. They moved in silence, every footstep measured and cautious. As they neared the outskirts of the city, the first signs of the infected appeared, a few lone figures shambling through the streets, mindless and slow. They weren't the immediate threat, it was the horde that lurked beyond, waiting for any sign of life to strike. Captain Cole raised her hand, signaling the group to halt. They crouched low, blending into the shadows of the broken buildings. The air was tense, every sense heightened, as they watched the creatures move through the desolate streets. It was only a matter of time before they were discovered. "We wait for the right moment," Captain Cole whispered. But as they waited, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The sounds of moaning grew louder, and the night seemed to darken even further. Something was coming. Something bigger. The ground trembled with greater intensity, a low, ominous rumble that seemed to be shaking the very foundations of the earth. Captain Cole's hand tightened around the hilt of her weapon, her eyes scanning the horizon. The infected that had been aimlessly wandering the streets now froze in place, their heads jerking in unison as if responding to an unseen signal. They were no longer scattered. They were gathering. "It's too late," Dr. Hayes muttered, his face pale, eyes wide with terror. "They're not just random anymore. They're coordinated." A sudden, chilling roar echoed through the streets. It wasn't like the usual groans of the infected. This was something far more terrifying. The group moved quickly, ducking into an abandoned building for cover, but it was clear that the worst was yet to come. "What was that?" Sam asked, his voice barely a whisper, as he crouched by the broken window, peering out cautiously. Mara's eyes narrowed. "That sound, it came from deeper within the city. Something is leading them." Lily, who had been silent for most of the journey, spoke up, her voice trembling. "Do you think it's possible they've developed a hierarchy? Some sort of leader?" Captain Cole looked at her, her expression grim. "It's not just possible, it's likely. And if that's the case, we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we thought." The group huddled together in the cold, their breaths visible in the frigid air, every second dragging as they waited for the approaching nightmare. The sounds of the horde grew louder, the ground shaking beneath their feet as if something massive was closing in on them. It wasn't just a few infected, it was an entire army, and it was coming straight for them. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, fear creeping into her voice. "We move, but carefully," Mara replied, her voice steady, though there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "We need to get to the center of the city and find out what's really going on. We can't let this go on any longer. For all we know, that roar is a signal. They're gathering for something bigger." The group nodded in agreement, though none of them were sure what lay ahead. They had come this far, and turning back was no longer an option. The fate of humanity was hanging in the balance. They slipped out of the building quietly, keeping to the shadows. The air was thick with tension as they moved deeper into the city, avoiding the scattered infected that still wandered the streets. But the deeper they went, the more they realized that something was horribly wrong. The horde wasn't just random anymore. They were moving with purpose, and that purpose seemed to be leading them toward something, or someone. As they passed through a ruined plaza, the group finally reached the epicenter of the city, where the sound of the horde had been the loudest. It was a desolate wasteland, a place where buildings had collapsed and streets were nothing but rubble. But there, in the center, something stood out, an enormous structure, one that had once been a thriving center of government or military operations, now twisted and shattered beyond recognition. But it wasn't the building itself that caught their attention, it was the sheer number of infected gathered around it, gathered in formation as though they were waiting for orders. "Why are they all here?" Sam whispered. "What are they waiting for?" Mara frowned, her gaze scanning the scene. It was clear now that the infected were not mindless zombies, they were organized. At the base of the structure, in the midst of the horde, there was something that stood out. A figure. Unlike the others, this one moved with purpose, its gait deliberate and sure. It was tall, cloaked in dark, tattered robes, and as it turned, the group's blood ran cold. The creature had eyes that glowed with an unnatural, eerie light. "That's no ordinary infected," Dr. Hayes breathed. "That's something different." Mara's heart raced. It must be the leader. The one controlling them. The figure turned toward them, its glowing eyes locking with theirs for a split second. And then, without a word, it raised its hand. The horde shifted in unison, their gaze fixed on the group. It was as if they had been commanded, and now they were ready to attack. "We need to move, now!" Mara shouted, but it was already too late. The first wave of infected came charging toward them, a mass of gnashing teeth and outstretched arms. In an instant, chaos erupted. The group scattered, dodging the oncoming onslaught. Sam threw a wrench at one of the zombies, knocking it down temporarily, while Lily grabbed a nearby piece of debris and swung it at another. Dr. Hayes, with his scientist's mind, moved quickly, creating a makeshift barrier with whatever he could find, hoping to slow the horde long enough for them to escape. But Mara knew they couldn't keep running. This was the final stand. The figure, the leader, was the key. If they didn't take it down now, humanity would have no chance. She raised her weapon, eyes fixed on the cloaked figure that stood at the heart of the chaos. "Get to the leader," she shouted. "If we take it down, the rest will fall." With one final surge of energy, the group charged toward the center of the horde, cutting their way through the infected. Every step felt like it could be their last, but the thought of the future, of saving humanity, kept them moving forward. The figure's glowing eyes bore into them as they drew closer, and just as they reached the leader, the ground cracked open beneath them, sending them plummeting into the darkness below. The fall seemed endless. There was no time to brace, no time to prepare for the harsh impact. As the ground rose up to meet them, Captain Mara Cole braced herself, her body hitting the earth with a sickening thud. She gasped, her breath knocked out of her, and struggled to regain her bearings. The world spun around her, but she forced herself to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. "Everyone okay?" she called out, her voice sharp but filled with urgency. From the darkness, Sam groaned, his voice echoing. "I think so, just a little shaken up." Lily's voice came next, weaker but still alive. "I'm here, but where are we?" Mara's eyes adjusted to the dim light, her gaze scanning the underground cavern they had fallen into. The walls were jagged and uneven, a stark contrast to the once pristine city above. The air was thick with dust, and there was an unmistakable stench of rot that permeated the cavern. The sounds of the horde, once so distant, were now eerily muffled, as if the fall had put some distance between them and the chaos above. But the danger was far from over. "We're underground," Mara said, her voice tight. "And we need to get out. Now." Dr. Hayes, still shaken, pushed himself up from the ground, brushing off the dirt and rubble. "This doesn't make sense. We were heading toward the leader, but now we're down here? What is this place?" Before Mara could answer, the ground trembled again, though this time it felt different. The vibrations were slow, deliberate. As if something was moving beneath them. Something large. A chilling realization settled over her. "We're not alone down here." Sam grabbed his weapon, his fingers tightening around the handle as he peered into the dark. "Whatever it is, it's not friendly." "Keep your guard up," Mara ordered, her hand instinctively reaching for the flashlight clipped to her belt. She flicked it on, illuminating the path ahead. The cavern stretched far beyond their immediate sight, and it was clear that this underground network wasn't just a random hole. It was a place of purpose. It was designed to contain something. "What is this place?" Lily whispered again, her voice barely audible. "It's some kind of underground complex," Dr. Hayes speculated. "Maybe a research facility. It would explain the smell, the contamination." But before they could make any further observations, a low, guttural growl echoed through the cavern. A chill ran down Mara's spine. It wasn't the usual moan of a zombie. This was deeper, more menacing. And then the ground shook again, harder this time, and from the shadows, the source of the growl emerged. At first, it was barely visible. Just a hulking silhouette against the backdrop of the cavern. But as it drew closer, the shape became clearer, and the group could see it for what it truly was. It was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal infected. Its skin was stretched tight over its bulging muscles, its body covered in deep scars and open wounds. But what truly made it terrifying were the eyes, bright, glowing, and filled with malice. The beast was no ordinary zombie. It was something else entirely. It had been altered, transformed into a monstrous creature with the sole purpose of hunting them down. "Move!" Mara shouted, but it was already too late. The creature lunged at them, its massive claws slashing through the air. Sam barely dodged in time, but the beast's claw raked across his arm, leaving a deep gash. "Sam!" Lily screamed, rushing to his side. But Mara knew they couldn't afford to stop. They had to keep moving. "Get back!" Mara ordered. She raised her weapon and fired, but the bullets did little to stop the creature. It roared in pain, but then it only became more furious, charging toward them with frightening speed. "We need a plan!" Dr. Hayes yelled, ducking as the creature swiped at him. Mara's mind raced. This wasn't a normal zombie, this was something far more dangerous. It was more than just a mindless predator. It was a force of nature, and they were stuck in its lair. "Head for the tunnels!" Mara shouted. "If we can outrun it, we can find another way out." They turned and ran, but the creature was relentless. It pursued them with terrifying speed, its footsteps shaking the ground beneath them. They dove into the maze of tunnels, but every twist and turn only seemed to bring them closer to the beast. As they ran, Dr. Hayes shouted, "There's a door. Over there." Mara's eyes darted to where he was pointing. A metal door, partially open, stood at the end of the tunnel. Without hesitation, they charged toward it. The creature's roars echoed behind them, and they could feel its presence closing in. With a final burst of energy, they reached the door and slammed it shut behind them. The sound of the creature's claws scraping against the metal was deafening, but they were safe, at least for now. Breathing heavily, they leaned against the door, trying to catch their breath. "What the hell was that thing?" Sam gasped, clutching his bleeding arm. Mara shook her head. "I don't know, but it's clear we're not just dealing with zombies anymore. That thing, it was something else." "We need to keep moving," Dr. Hayes said, looking around the room they had locked themselves in. It appeared to be some sort of laboratory, filled with old equipment and dusty research papers. But none of that mattered right now. They needed answers. Mara took a deep breath and nodded. "We have to find the leader, and we have to stop whatever it is that's causing this. That creature wasn't just a random mutation. It was created, and we need to figure out why." They looked at each other, understanding the weight of their next move. There was no going back now. The final war had begun, and they were about to face their greatest challenge yet. As they moved deeper into the underground facility, the sense of dread grew stronger. They were getting closer to the source of the infection, the heart of the beast. And they had to destroy it, or humanity would be lost forever. But in the depths of the facility, something far darker waited for them. And they would soon discover that the battle for the future of Earth was only just beginning. The air inside the underground facility felt thick with tension, each step echoing through the narrow hallways like a countdown to something inevitable. The faint hum of malfunctioning machinery added an eerie ambience to the already unsettling silence. The group moved cautiously, their weapons drawn, every sense alert to the smallest sound. Mara led the way, her eyes scanning the walls for any sign of danger. They had barely made it out of the clutches of the mutated creature, but she knew they weren't safe yet. They were deep within the heart of this twisted complex, and whatever experiments had been conducted here had only served to create horrors beyond imagination. The laboratory-like environment stretched out before them, rooms filled with overturned equipment, shattered glass, and faded blueprints scattered across the floor. It was clear that whatever had been done here wasn't meant to be a secret, it was meant to be controlled, studied, and ultimately used for something far more sinister. "What do you think happened here?" Lily whispered, her voice barely audible in the stillness. "Whatever it was," Dr. Hayes replied, adjusting his glasses, "it went horribly wrong. This place reeks of desperation, like they were trying to control something they couldn't understand. Or maybe they were trying to create it," Mara muttered under her breath. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure the others were keeping up. "Whatever the case, we need to get to the central control room. It should have answers, At least, that's what we're hoping. The group continued forward, following the dim, flickering lights that barely illuminated the corridor ahead. They passed more rooms, each one filled with signs of experimentation, strange vials, syringes, and even more disturbing, remnants of failed tests. The stench of decay lingered in the air, a constant reminder of how far this place had fallen. Then, they reached a massive door at the end of the hall. It was reinforced with thick steel, a bright red sign above it reading, "Authorized personnel only." "This is it," Mara said, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. The central control room. Without waiting for any further discussion, she stepped forward and attempted to open the door. It was locked tight, but with a few swift movements, Sam used his skills to hack into the system. The door clicked open with a low hiss, and they stepped inside. The room was vast, filled with rows of computer terminals and massive screens. On the far wall, a gigantic map of the city and surrounding areas blinked in and out, displaying a network of red zones that covered nearly the entire globe. It was clear that the infected had spread far beyond what they had initially imagined. Dr. Hayes approached one of the computers, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he tried to access the data. The tension in the room grew with each passing second as the others watched him work. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he turned to face them, his face pale. "It's worse than we thought," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. This wasn't just an infection. It was a project, a global experiment. These infected, they were engineered. Mara's heart skipped a beat. Engineered? You mean to tell me this wasn't some virus that spread by accident? Dr. Hayes nodded, his eyes wide with disbelief. No. This was deliberate. It started as a government-funded project to create a new form of biological weapon, something that could be used in warfare. They tried to create a super soldier, someone immune to disease and impervious to fear. But something went horribly wrong. Instead of enhancing human capabilities, it mutated the subjects into these mindless creatures. And once they realized their mistake, they tried to cover it up. But the outbreak spread faster than they could contain it. Mara's mind raced. So this entire apocalypse was caused by humans? Yes, Dr. Hayes replied, his voice tinged with regret. But it didn't stop there. They didn't just try to contain the outbreak, they tried to accelerate it. They thought they could harness the power of the mutation, evolve it into something more manageable, something that could be controlled. That's when they created the creature we saw, Sam muttered, his voice grim. The one that nearly killed us. Exactly, Dr. Hayes said. It was a new breed, far stronger, faster, and more intelligent than the regular infected. And it wasn't alone. There were others like it, scattered around the globe. The worst part? They were breeding them. Lily gasped. Breeding them? Like an army? Dr. Hayes nodded solemnly. Yes. They were trying to create an unstoppable force, using the mutation to build an army of these monsters. The gravity of their situation hit Mara with full force. It wasn't just about survival anymore. They weren't fighting an infection, they were fighting an organized, purpose-driven force, created by the very people who had once controlled the world. And where is the source of this? Mara asked, her voice hard as steel. Where do we go to stop it? Dr. Hayes hesitated, his gaze dropping to the screen in front of him. There's a facility, deep underground. It's the central hub of the entire operation. If we can get there and destroy it, we might have a chance to stop everything. But it's heavily guarded. It's going to be a suicide mission. We don't have a choice, Mara said firmly, her expression unyielding. We've come this far. We finish it. We stop them, or humanity is done for. The others nodded, the weight of their decision settling on them. They knew what they had to do. It wasn't just about getting out alive anymore, it was about ensuring there would be a world left to live in. Let's go, Mara ordered. We finish this. Together. With renewed determination, the group left the control room, heading toward the heart of the complex, knowing that this final battle would be the one that determined the future of the Earth. The creature and its army were just the beginning. The real enemy was still ahead. And they would stop it. Or die trying. As they made their way deeper into the facility, the air grew colder. The sounds of machinery were replaced by an unnatural silence, and the flickering lights cast long, haunting shadows. It was as if the very walls of the facility were waiting for them to make their final move. But with every step, the group grew more resolute. They would not let the human race fall. Not while there was still a chance to fight back. The final war was upon them, and the fate of Earth rested in their hands. Now, there was no turning back.